So this video is not the actual Prezi that I did, but how I used the Prezi to make a presentation on the next generation science standards, walking you through my thinking, quick tour through the Prezi in case you want to take the Prezi and do a similar presentation. Here's what I was thinking. I started with this question and let them have some time to think about it. I then told them we were going to connect to the standards, consider the standards, and then look at the challenge of the practices in the standards. So I was trying to give them an overview of where we were going before we went there. And then I asked them, using Arthur Eisencraft's acronym, what do you think? So I said I wanted to know their initial thoughts on the guiding question for the presentation. Listen to anybody who wanted to speak. My audience, there weren't a lot of people familiar with it, but I did want to honor any prior knowledge that they had. So then we dove into the Connect section, in which I introduced the standards in a way that people who had never seen a next-gen standard could get a feel for what they are. Started with elementary, and you'll see me present each of the standards in this first section in this way, where I focus on the content area here so that they could see that it was good, solid content they were familiar with. But then I backed up to show them how the whole standard required the practices embedded with the standard, with the content. And then I backed up to show them what a whole standard would look like. Gave them a little time to process that. Then we went to middle school. Again, focus on what the content is, back up to the whole standard so they can see the practices embedded in the standard, showed them all the standards for that topic, and then reminded them that everything there is explication of the standard. And then I walked them through, at this section, the three core areas of the practices, the disciplinary core ideas, and cross-cutting concepts, if some people hadn't seen those three pillars that each standard is built on. Looked at a high school example. Again, focus on the content. Back up to the process attached to the content. And then for this example, since I was focusing on practices, I showed them the specific practice backing up associated with that standard. That probably took 20 minutes, 15 minutes. I gave them time to really connect with the standard. Went back, asked my key question again, and then gave them some time to tell me what they were thinking and thoughts that they had. Now the consider section, I set up this kind of tic-tac-toe board, but it wasn't tic-tac-toe. They're actually going to score three kinds of teachers. So walking you through, I first told them they were going to score, and then talked about these three different kinds of good science teachers. I made the point that these were not bad science teachers. They're all good science teachers. And then gave them the criteria of how to score these teachers based on their experiences with guiding kids toward NGSS standards. So then we jumped into the high school example, showed them the whole standard, focused in, and then I gave them a few minutes to digest all of these standards for a high school teacher and think about how they would back up, and then I told them to score. So they might have put a 0 here and a 1 here and a 2 there. However they scored the high school. Then we went to the middle school, again, let them look, think, process. In one of my sessions, I did well by actually having them turn to a neighbor and talk out their scores. That's the way to do it. Back up, they scored each of the types of teachers with the scoring criteria. And again, remember, it's focusing on how much experience the teacher had, that kind of teacher would have going into implementation of the next generation science standards. And then the last one was elementary. Let them process. back up, let them score. Sorry about that. And let them talk about their scores. And then I showed them my scores, and I told them that this isn't science. That wasn't a rigorous analysis of mine. It was just a general sense, and the whole point of this section, oops, go backward. The whole point of that section was for them to see how a lecture teacher really has very little experience that he or she can bring to guiding kids toward mastery of the NGSS. An inquiry teacher that has been using guided inquiry would have experiences, but not all the way. So I think I'm off track with my Prezi. Give me a second. There we go. Back on task now. Back on the path. Took them back to the question, and then at this point, before I asked their thoughts, I told them this was my thinking on Inquiry 2.0, which is how inquiry teachers are ready to implement NGSS, but they've got to retool it and bring it up to the next level. They've got to take inquiry and reboot it up to Inquiry 2.0. Ask for their thoughts. And then in the last section, and that section right there was probably about 15 minutes also, 15 or 20 minutes. In the last section, the challenge section, I guided them on the challenge of the practices. So we took a look at the practices. This was just a little bit to show them the method of my madness. Ignore the parentheses of how I chose the standards that are in this Prezi, so that there were representatives from elementary, middle, high school, life, physical, earth, life, physical, earth, life, earth. So that's how I got a good representation from all the standards. And then we started walking through the 8 practices in order of the framework, asking questions, defining problems. I backed up. This was a standard they hadn't seen before, so I gave them time to process it because it was new, and then focused on the standard of asking questions as an example of this practice. Then we started moving through most of these they had seen before. So practice number 2, developing and using models. Let them look at it, think about the practice, focus on a standard that implements that practice, planning and carried out investigations and the standards. Practice number 4, analyze and interpreting data. Let them digest. They had already seen this before, almost all of these, so it just took a little bit of time for them to digest what each of the practices meant. Using mathematical computational thinking, practices, and the standards. Now over here, to get constructing explanations and designing solutions, this was a standard they hadn't seen before, so I slowed down a little bit. Let them digest this new set of standards and how it shows constructing explanations and designing solutions. There it is, construct a scientific explanation. 7th practice, argument evidence from evidence. The yellow arrows were supposed to point it out, but you can probably recognize from now that I begin using the Prezi frames like that. That's a change I need to make in future editions. Think about the practice, the standards, then obtaining evaluation and communicating information. This was a little bit hard because it was split between 2 pages and I didn't want to change the PDFs. And the standards that are examples of those. And then we talked, finished up. Any questions, comments they had. This was designed as a 55-minute session. Went back to the question to focus their thinking on stepping up inquiry. And then I took them back to my thought on Inquiry 2.0 and how the NGSS require inquiry teachers to step it up. And then, like many of the participants at ASTA, realized, oh my gosh, if people haven't been using inquiry, it's going to be tough. Hope that helps.